All right, stop what you're doing because the White House just tossed out one of those phrases that sounds like strength, but usually ends with the public paying the bill. Karoline Leavitt went out and said, the line every administration loves when they want maximum freedom and minimum accountability. All options are on the table. And she didn't leave it vague. She pointed right at it. Airstrikes are on the table. So here's the real question. If diplomacy is truly first, why are they waving the military option like a warning label? And what exactly are they preparing the public for?
Well, I think one thing President Trump is very good at is always keeping all of his options on the table, and airstrikes would be one of the many, many options that are on the table for the commander-in-chief. Diplomacy is always the first option for the president. He's told all of you last night that what you're hearing publicly from the Iranian regime is quite differently from the messages the administration is receiving privately. I think the president has an interest in exploring those messages. However, with that said, the president has shown he's unafraid to use military options if and when he deems necessary, and nobody knows that better than Iran.
Karoline Leavitt just went on camera and delivered the kind of line that always sounds tough in a headline, but can get very dangerous very fast. All options are on the table when it comes to Iran, including airstrikes. And notice the game here. They wrap it in diplomacy first, but then they spotlight the military option so everyone hears the warning. That isn't a plan, it's a pressure tactic. And it's also a way to keep the public on standby for escalation without ever explaining the threshold. Then Leavitt adds the fog machine phrase, Iran is supposedly sending private messages that don't match what they say in public. That's convenient because private signals can justify anything later deal delay or strike without the public being able to verify what was actually said. And finally, she sells it as a personality trait. Trump isn't afraid to use force and Iran knows it. Here's the bottom line. When a government talks in slogans, instead of specifics, goals, limits, timelines, you're not being informed, you're being conditioned. So the question we should all be asking is simple. If diplomacy is really first, where are the details? What's the offer? What's the demand? And what's the off-ramp? When Karoline Leavitt says all options are on the table, that's not real information. It's a blank check phrase. It's the political version of, trust me, bro. Because all options doesn't just mean diplomacy and sanctions. It means cyber operations, covert actions, economic pressure, and yes, airstrikes. And the key detail is she didn't leave it vague. She explicitly confirmed that airstrikes are part of the menu. Now watch the rhetorical trick they always pull. She says airstrikes are one of many options. That's supposed to calm you down, like relax, it's just one option. But here's the reality. You don't spotlight the scariest option unless you want it felt. It's not a policy briefing, it's theater. It's intimidation signaling. It's a message to Iran and to the American public saying don't act surprised if you wake up to a breaking news banner. And this is where the vlogger brain kicks in. Why are they selling vibes instead of details? If you're serious about diplomacy, you don't hide behind a slogan. You lay out a framework. What are the goals? What are the limits? What's the timeline? What's the off-ramp? What oversight exists so this doesn't turn into a slow-motion disaster? Because all options is the opposite of clarity. It's a fog machine. It protects leadership from being pinned down today, and it gives them an escape hatch tomorrow. If escalation happens, they'll point back and say, we warned you. We told you all options were on the table. And that's exactly why you should treat that phrase like a red flag, not a reassurance. Now let's talk about the slipperiest part of Leavitt's message, because this is where governments love to hide the ball. She hints that Iran is sending private messages that don't match what they're saying in public. And do you know why that line is so powerful? Because it gives the White House a choose-your-own-adventure ending. If they want to look like peacemakers later, it becomes, we had private signals. We explored diplomacy. We did the responsible thing. If they want to justify escalation, it becomes, we tried diplomacy. Those private messages were fake, insincere, a stall tactic, so we had to respond. Either way, it's built to be unverifiable. The public can't fact-check private messages, Congress can't debate private messages in real time, and the media can't independently confirm them unless someone leaks, then it turns into a spin war over anonymous sources. Now, I'm not saying private channels don't exist, they do, but the way this is being presented is strategic. It's ambiguity as power. It expands their freedom to maneuver while shrinking your ability to demand accountability. Because if you can't see the evidence, you're stuck reacting to whatever storyline they choose to roll out next. So when you hear private signals, translate it like this. We want maximum flexibility, maximum narrative cover, and we want you to accept that we know things you don't, so stop asking for specifics. And that should set off alarms every single time. Next, Leavitt leans hard on the commander-in-chief, framing Trump as the decisive strongman who has choices, and Iran supposedly knows he's willing to act. And that's the oldest trick in the political playbook. Wrap the message in the uniform. Make skepticism feel unpatriotic. Make basic questions sound like weakness. Turn war powers into branding, like it's a campaign slogan instead of a constitutional reality. But here's the problem. Commander-in-Chief is not a substitute for clarity. It's not an argument, it's a title. And titles don't answer the questions the public actually deserves when military force is being floated on live television. What counts as success? What's the threshold for escalation? Who makes the call? And what oversight exists? What's the exit plan? What does done even look like? Because once all options becomes the headline and Commander-in-Chief becomes the shield, the message to the public is basically, sit down, we'll tell you later. And that's how disasters happen. Not because leaders don't have the right to defend national interests, but because they hide behind vague language to avoid building consensus and accountability. They keep it hazy while they maneuver, then the stakes explode, and suddenly the line becomes, it's too late to debate, now support the mission. That's why this framing matters. When a government starts selling authority instead of explaining strategy, you're not being informed, you're being managed. Now, I can already hear the defenders warming up, so let's knock these arguments down fast because they sound reasonable until you look at what's actually being said. Deterrence matters. You have to keep Iran guessing. Sure, deterrence matters, but deterrence doesn't require turning every press briefing into a threat montage. Deterrence can be paired with clarity, especially for the American public, the people who carry the consequences if this escalates. And all options are on the table isn't deterrence by itself. It's indefinite permission. It's a blank check phrase that keeps the door open for whatever they decide later. They said diplomacy is first. That sounds comforting until you realize diplomacy first is often used like a rhetorical pillow. It's there to soften the hard edge, to make the hawkish message easier to swallow. The test is simple. Are they explaining the diplomatic path with specific goals, conditions, timelines, off-ramps, or are they just saying the word diplomacy while spotlighting airstrikes? In this transcript, the spotlight is obvious. Private messages prove diplomacy is working. No, private messages prove only that private messages exist. Without transparency, the public is being asked to trust a storyline. And even when details can't be shared, a responsible government can still share a framework. What it wants, what it won't accept, and what success actually looks like. That's the difference between diplomacy and vibes. Trump isn't afraid to use military force good. Strength isn't not being afraid. Strength is discipline planning and accountability. A leader can be willing to act and still be obligated to explain the logic, the limits, and the exit plan. Not afraid is a slogan, it's not governance. So here's what we should be watching from here, because this is exactly where these stories usually go sideways, and you don't realize it until you're already trapped in the headlines. The language gets bigger while the details get smaller. When the rhetoric escalates but the specifics vanish, that's not strategy, that's marketing. That's them selling a mood instead of a plan. All options starts showing up everywhere. If every answer becomes all options are on the table, you're being conditioned for a decision that won't be fully debated until it's already in motion. Because once action starts, the line becomes, now isn't the time for questions. Leaks and anonymous sourcing become the battlefield. When they can't sell the policy, they sell the narrative war sensationalist, reporting fake leaks, anonymous sources, and the public gets stuck arguing about who to believe instead of demanding the basic thing that matters. What is the plan? Private messages become the magic card. If every pivot is justified by something you can't verify, that's not diplomacy, that's narrative control. It's a get out of accountability free card. Oversight gets framed as sabotage. Watch for that shift. Questions become anti-American, Congress becomes weak, and the press becomes the enemy. That's how decision makers protect themselves from scrutiny. And let me be crystal clear, wanting to avoid war doesn't make you naive. Wanting a plan doesn't make you weak. Demanding clarity is literally the baseline of democracy, especially when officials casually float airstrikes like it's just another bullet point. So here's what I want from you. If you want me to keep breaking down these briefings and translating the spin into plain English, hit like, subscribe, and comment one thing: details, not slogans. Because the moment a government starts governing through catchphrases is the moment the public gets dragged behind decisions they never truly got to debate.